Standing in my custom Valentino gown worth more than most people's yearly salary, I watch my fiancé, Marcus Chen, announce his engagement to someone else. And the most devastating part isn't the betrayal itself, but the way he looks directly at me while doing it. His dark eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that tells me this moment was always his endgame. That every kiss, every whispered, "I love you," every night I fell asleep in his arms was just another calculated step toward this public execution of my dignity in front of 500 of the most elite families in the country. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus says into the microphone at the Grand Meridian Hotel's crystal chandeliered ballroom, his voice carrying that smooth confidence I once found irresistible but now recognize as the practiced tone of a predator who's cornered his prey. I want to share something that's been weighing on my heart for months now, something that I can no longer keep hidden, because true love deserves to be celebrated openly and honestly. The charity gala continues around us, champagne glasses clinking, designer gowns rustling, the cream of society's fifth-generation families mingling in their natural habitat, completely unaware they're about to witness the systematic destruction of the Blackwood family legacy. And I stand frozen in the spotlight of my own humiliation, feeling the weight of my grandmother's sapphire necklace around my throat like a noose, watching my parents' faces across the room transform from confusion to horror to something that looks dangerously close to heartbreak. "Emma Lou and I," Marcus continues, his arm tightening around the waist of the sweet-faced kindergarten teacher beside him, a girl who can't be more than 23 with gentle brown eyes and the kind of natural beauty that requires no enhancement. No designer clothes, no family empire to make her worthy of love. Have been blessed with something I never expected to find. A connection so pure, so genuine, that it would be a disservice to everyone, including my dear Sophia, to continue living a lie. The lie, I want to scream, is that any of this is spontaneous, that this isn't the culmination of 3 years of methodical manipulation designed to place me exactly where I am right now, publicly humiliated, emotionally destroyed, and completely unprepared for the financial devastation that's about to follow because Marcus Chen didn't choose tonight randomly. He chose it because tomorrow morning, the insider information he's been feeding to our competitors will result in Blackwood Hotels losing the three largest international contracts in our company's century-long history. "Sophia," Marcus says, turning those dark eyes on me with what anyone else would mistake for regret, but I now recognize as barely contained triumph. "You're an incredible woman, brilliant in business, born into a world of privilege and power that I could never fully understand. But Emma has shown me what real love feels like. Not the kind based on family expectations or social climbing, but the kind that grows from genuine compatibility and shared values about what matters in life." The words hit me like physical blows because I know exactly what he's doing, painting me as the cold, calculating heiress who cared more about business mergers than matters of the heart, while positioning himself as the romantic hero who chose love over money. When the truth is that Marcus Chen spent 3 years studying me like a business acquisition, learning every weakness, every insecurity, every pressure point he could exploit to gain access to the Blackwood fortune and then systematically destroy it from within. I remember now, with the clarity that only comes from complete devastation, how he convinced me to fire my assistant, Jenny Morrison, under the guise of testing whether I trusted him more than staff who'd been with the family for decades. How he isolated me from my childhood friends by suggesting they were jealous of our relationship and didn't want to see me happy. How he positioned himself as my emotional support, while simultaneously creating the very problems that made me need supporting in the first place. "Emma is 6 months pregnant," Marcus announces, and the sharp intake of breath from the crowd is audible even over the string quartet. And I feel something inside me shatter completely, because this isn't just betrayal. This is the revelation that while I was planning our wedding, while I was imagining our future children bearing the Blackwood name, he was already creating a family with someone else, using my resources to court another woman, laughing at my naive trust behind my back. The pregnancy announcement is perfectly timed because it makes any protest from me seem petty and heartless, makes me the villain who would stand between a man and his pregnant girlfriend, between a child and its father, and I realize with horrifying clarity that Marcus has orchestrated this entire scenario to ensure that no matter how I react, I'll be the monster in this story, the privileged princess who can't accept that true love conquered her family's money and influence. My mother, Catherine Blackwood, catches my eye from across the room, her usually perfect composure cracking as she realizes what this means for our family. Not just the personal humiliation, but the business implications, because Marcus has been my father's trusted advisor for the past year, has been involved in every major decision, every confidential negotiation, every strategic move we've made to maintain our position as the premier luxury hotel chain on the West Coast. I know this is unexpected, Marcus continues, his voice taking on that tone of false humility that I now recognize as manipulation. And I want everyone to know that Sophia has been nothing but gracious about this situation, understanding that matters of the heart can't be forced or arranged based on family expectations, that sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places, and we have to be brave enough to follow it wherever it leads. The lie burns because I've been nothing but gracious. I've been completely unaware, blindsided by a man who spent 3 years perfecting his performance. 3 years making me believe that our relationship was real while he methodically positioned himself to destroy everything my family has built across 5 generations. Everything my great-great-grandfather started when he built the first Blackwood Hotel in 1924, with nothing but determination and a vision for unparalleled luxury hospitality. I watch Emma Lou's face during Marcus's speech and see something there that gives me pause, a flicker of uncertainty, a moment where she glances at me with what might be sympathy or guilt, as if she's beginning to understand that she's not just the other woman in this triangle, but another piece on Marcus's chessboard, another tool in his systematic destruction of the Blackwood legacy. And I wonder if she knows about the business sabotage, or if she genuinely believes this is a love story. The applause when Marcus finishes his announcement is polite but uncomfortable. The kind of response that happens when people don't know how to react to a social situation that breaks all established rules of decorum, when they're witnessing something that feels more like a public execution than a romantic revelation. And I stand there in my designer gown feeling like I'm drowning in plain sight, while everyone around me pretends this is normal, this is acceptable, this is just how these things sometimes happen in high society. Congratulations, I hear myself say, my voice somehow steady, despite the fact that my entire world is collapsing around me. And the word tastes like poison in my mouth because I know that congratulating them is exactly what Marcus wants, exactly what will make me look gracious and mature, while inside I'm screaming with the realization that I've been played by a master manipulator who saw my family's wealth and power as a challenge to be conquered rather than a legacy to be respected. The rest of the evening passes in a blur of forced smiles and sympathetic glances, of well-meaning friends and family members who don't know what to say to me, who can't possibly understand that this isn't just a broken engagement, but the beginning of a carefully orchestrated campaign to destroy everything the Blackwood family represents, everything we've worked for, everything we are. I make my excuses and leave early, driving my Bugatti Chiron through the empty streets of the city with tears streaming down my face, thinking about how Marcus convinced me that this car was an unnecessary display of wealth, how he gradually made me ashamed of the privileges I was born into, how he systematically dismantled my confidence in every aspect of my identity until I was dependent on his approval for my own self-worth. The next 3 months unfold exactly as Marcus planned them, with the precision of a military campaign designed to achieve maximum destruction in minimum time, and I watch helplessly as my family's empire crumbles under the weight of his betrayal, as business deals we thought were secure suddenly fall through due to insider information he provided to our competitors, as loyal employees begin to question whether they want to remain with a company that's clearly in decline. My father, Richard Blackwood, a man who built his life around the principle that handshake agreements and family honor matter more than written contracts, suffers a massive heart attack when he realizes the full extent of Marcus's betrayal. When he discovers that the young man he welcomed into our family like a son has been systematically feeding our proprietary information to rival hotel chains for over a year. The doctors say it's stress-related, that my father's heart simply couldn't handle the combination of professional betrayal and personal humiliation. The realization that he misjudged someone so completely, that his desire to see me happy blinded him to the warning signs that Marcus Chen was never the devoted fiancé he pretended to be, but a phoenix man, using our family as a stepping stone to wealth and power he could never achieve on his own merit. My mother, Catherine, retreats into herself after the heart attack, spending her days sitting by my father's hospital bed, reading him financial reports in a whisper, as if she can somehow will him back to health through sheer determination to save the family business. But I can see the depression settling over her like a heavy blanket, the way she's lost weight, the way her usually immaculate appearance has become careless and distracted. The worst moment comes when my grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood, the family matriarch who survived the Great Depression and 2 world wars, who built our international reputation through decades of uncompromising standards and gracious hospitality, calls me to her bedside and whispers that she's ashamed of what's happened to our family, ashamed that she lived long enough to see the Blackwood name become associated with scandal and failure. "I don't understand, darling," she says in her elegant voice that still carries traces of her British accent after 60 years in America. "How we could have been so wrong about that young man. How someone could smile at our dinner table for 3 years while planning our destruction. How someone could use your love as a weapon against everything we've built." Grandmother Eleanor dies 2 weeks later, and the doctors call it heart failure. But I know it's really heartbreak. The kind of deep, soul-crushing disappointment that happens when someone who spent 93 years believing in the fundamental goodness of people discovers that some individuals are capable of calculated cruelty beyond imagination. The funeral is smaller than it should be because many of our social circle don't know how to behave around us anymore, don't know whether associating with the Blackwood family will damage their own reputations. And I stand beside my grandmother's casket in the rain, thinking about how Marcus never even sent flowers, never acknowledged that his actions contributed to the death of a woman who treated him like family. Marcus and Emma's wedding takes place 6 months after their announcement, in what feels like the ultimate insult. They use the Blackwood family chapel, the same sacred space where my parents were married, where my grandparents exchanged vows, where I dreamed of saying "I do" to someone who truly loved me. And Marcus arranges this specifically to maximize the humiliation, to make sure everyone knows that he's not just taking my fiancée, but claiming ownership of my family's most precious traditions. I don't attend the wedding, but I see the photos in the society pages, images of Marcus in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking triumphant rather than romantic. Emma in a simple white dress that somehow makes my elaborate designer wedding plans seem ridiculous in comparison. And I realize that even their choice of venue and style is calculated to send a message about values and authenticity versus shallow materialism. The legal battles begin immediately after their honeymoon, with Marcus using his insider knowledge of our business operations to win case after case against us, representing clients who sue Blackwood hotels for breach of contract, employment disputes, and regulatory violations that he helped create during his time as my father's advisor, turning every confidence we shared with him into ammunition for our enemies. Our lawyers tell us that Marcus's actions might be unethical, but they're not technically illegal. That we can't prove he deliberately sabotaged our business relationships because he was careful to cover his tracks, because he spent 3 years learning our legal vulnerabilities and positioning himself to exploit them without crossing the line into criminal behavior. The foreclosure notice arrives on a Tuesday morning, exactly 18 months after Marcus's announcement, delivered to the ancestral Blackwood mansion that's been in our family for 4 generations, the house where I learned to walk in marble hallways lined with portraits of my ancestors, where I practiced piano in the music room that overlooks the rose garden my great-grandmother designed, where I dreamed of raising my own children someday in the same loving, stable environment that shaped me. I'm alone in the house when Marcus comes to visit me one last time, and I know he's arranged this deliberately, timed it for when my parents are at the hospital dealing with another of my father's cardiac episodes when there's no one to witness what he knows will be his final victory lap. "Hello, Sophia," he says when I open the door, and his voice carries that same smooth confidence that once made me feel safe and loved, but now makes my skin crawl. And he's dressed in an expensive suit that I realize was probably paid for with money he embezzled from our accounts, standing on my doorstep like he owns the place, which in a legal sense he's about to. "I wanted to check on you," Marcus continues, stepping into the foyer without being invited, his eyes scanning the antique furniture and original artwork with the calculating gaze of someone pricing items for auction, to make sure you're handling everything as well as can be expected given the circumstances. "The circumstances," I want to scream, are that you spent 3 years systematically destroying my family while pretending to love me, that you used my trust as a weapon against everything I hold dear, that you turned my capacity for love into the very tool of my own destruction. But instead, I just stare at him, trying to understand how I could have been so completely fooled by someone whose true nature is so obviously predatory. The revelation hits me like a physical blow because I realize that this was never about love or even greed. This was about revenge against a social system that Marcus felt rejected by, about punishing an entire family for slights both real and imagined, about proving that intelligence and ruthlessness can triumph over inherited privilege and establish power. I made them pay for every slight, every condescending smile, every time your father talked to me like I was lucky to be in the same room as the great Blackwood family. Marcus continues, his mask of false concern finally slipping completely, revealing the cold satisfaction underneath. And the beautiful part is that I used their own daughter's love as the weapon to destroy them, turned their trust into their weakness, made them complicit in their own downfall. I understand now that Marcus documented everything, planned every move for 5 years before he even approached me, studied our family like a military strategist studying an enemy fortress, identifying every weakness, every point of vulnerability, every relationship he could exploit to gain the access he needed to destroy us from within. Emma doesn't know, does she? I ask, and Marcus's smile widens, because he knows I've finally grasped the full scope of his manipulation, the way he's used not just me, but her as well, turning two women into pawns in his elaborate revenge fantasy. Emma thinks this is a love story, Marcus says, and his voice carries genuine amusement at the idea. Thinks she rescued me from a cold, materialistic relationship with a woman who cared more about business than feelings. Thinks our baby will grow up in a world where love matters more than money, where authentic connections triumph over social expectations. The cruelty of using Emma's pregnancy as both a weapon against me and a cover for his true motivations is breathtaking in its calculated precision, and I realize that Marcus Chen is not just a social climber or opportunist, but someone fundamentally incapable of genuine human connection. Someone who sees every relationship as a transaction to be manipulated for maximum advantage. You won completely, I whisper, and the admission tastes like defeat in my mouth because it's true. Marcus achieved everything he set out to accomplish, destroyed my family's century-long legacy, humiliated us in front of our entire social circle, reduced us from one of the most powerful families on the West Coast to cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting the wrong person. I did, Marcus agrees, his satisfaction complete and unconcealed. And the best part is that everyone will remember this as a story about true love, conquering shallow materialism, about a phoenix man who chose happiness over wealth, about a spoiled heiress who couldn't accept that her money couldn't buy her the man she wanted. As consciousness fades, I see Marcus's satisfied smile, the way he stands in the foyer of my family's mansion, like a conqueror surveying his prize. And I think about how he'll probably renovate this house and fill it with his own family, how Emma will unknowingly raise their children in the home where my ancestors lived and loved and built something beautiful across multiple generations, how the Blackwood legacy will become nothing more than a cautionary tale about the dangers of naive trust. The bottle of my grandmother's sleeping pills sits empty on the marble floor beside me, and my last thought before everything goes black is that Marcus won so completely that even my death will be seen as proof of my weakness, evidence that spoiled rich girls can't handle real adversity, can't cope when their privileged world comes crashing down around them. Then I opened my eyes and realized I had been reborn. The morning light streaming through my bedroom windows is exactly the same as it was 3 years ago, filtering through the silk curtains my mother chose when she redecorated my suite to match my engagement to Marcus. And I sit up in my bed with the absolute certainty that I'm 25 years old again, that today is the morning Marcus will arrive with coffee and croissants from that little French bakery downtown. The morning he'll suggest we start merging our lives more completely by giving him access to the family's financial accounts. My body feels different, younger, stronger, as if the crushing weight of betrayal and grief has been lifted from my shoulders, but my mind retains every devastating detail of the next 3 years, every moment of manipulation and calculated cruelty, every step in Marcus's methodical destruction of everything I hold dear. And I realize that whatever force gave me this second chance has also given me the knowledge to prevent it all from happening again. The engagement ring on my finger feels heavy and wrong. The princess cut diamond that once symbolized hope and love, now feeling like a shackle binding me to a man who sees me as nothing more than a stepping stone to power and wealth. And I slip it off my finger and set it on the nightstand with a sense of relief so profound it's almost physical. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you today. Have something important to discuss. Love you." And the casual endearment that once made my heart flutter now makes my stomach turn because I know exactly what he wants to discuss, exactly how he'll frame his request for financial access as a romantic gesture of trust and commitment. I delete the message without responding and walk to my window overlooking the rose garden where my great-grandmother Eleanor used to teach me about patience and nurturing, where she explained that the most beautiful flowers require the most careful tending, that rushing the process of growth only leads to weak roots and early death. Wisdom I should have applied to my relationship with Marcus, instead of rushing headlong into a future that was always designed to destroy me. The key difference between the naive girl I was and the woman I am now is knowledge. I know that Marcus will arrive in exactly 47 minutes with coffee and pastries and that practiced smile that once made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. I know that he'll suggest we start sharing bank accounts as a test of true intimacy. I know that agreeing to his request will be the first domino in a chain reaction that leads to my family's complete destruction. But more importantly, I know that Marcus expects me to fight for him, to compete with Emma for his attention, to prove my love through increasingly desperate gestures of devotion and financial generosity. And I understand now that the only way to win a game designed to destroy me is to refuse to play it at all. I was foolish before, blinded by what I thought was love but now recognize as skilled manipulation. And I won't make the same mistake twice, because I have something Marcus doesn't expect me to have: the knowledge of exactly how his strategy unfolds and the cold determination to dismantle it before it can begin. When Marcus arrives 47 minutes later, carrying coffee and croissants and wearing that charming smile that once made my heart race, I'm ready for him with a calmness that comes from knowing exactly what he's really after, exactly how he plans to get it, and exactly how I'm going to stop him. "Good morning, darling," Marcus says, leaning in to kiss me with the same practiced affection that fooled me for 3 years. But this time I turn my head so his lips brush my cheek instead. A small gesture that I can see confuses him, even as he tries to cover his surprise with another smile. "We need to talk," I say, my voice carrying a coolness that I know he doesn't expect. And I watch his eyes sharpen with interest because this isn't how our morning ritual usually unfolds. This isn't the warm, welcoming response he's cultivated through months of careful conditioning. "Of course," Marcus says, setting down the coffee and pastries with movements that are just slightly too controlled, too careful. And I realize that he's already calculating how to adjust his approach to account for my unexpected behavior, already shifting into the manipulation mode that comes as naturally to him as breathing. I've been thinking about our relationship, about our future together, and I've realized that I need space to focus on the business right now, I say, and the words feel like freedom on my tongue, because this time I'm the one controlling the conversation. This time I'm the one with the strategic advantage. Marcus blinks, and for just a moment, his carefully constructed facade slips, revealing something calculating and cold underneath, before the concerned boyfriend mask slides back into place. "Darling, you seem different this morning. Is everything all right? Did something happen?" The fake concern in his voice once would have made me rush to reassure him, to apologize for my mood and explain away my reservations. But now I hear it for what it really is: a manipulation tactic designed to make me doubt my own instincts, to position himself as the caring partner worried about my emotional state, rather than the predator whose plans have just been disrupted. "Everything is fine," I say calmly, "but I think we should slow things down. Take some time apart to really consider what we want from this relationship, what we're building together, and whether it's sustainable in the long term." I watch Marcus process this information, see him mentally recalibrating his timeline and strategy, and I realize that his greatest weakness is his assumption that all relationships follow predictable patterns, that people will always react to manipulation in ways that serve his purposes, that women like me will always choose love over logic when forced to make a decision. "I don't understand," Marcus says. and his voice carries just the right note of confused hurt. The tone of a man who thought everything was perfect and can't comprehend why his girlfriend is suddenly pulling away. We've been so happy together, making plans for our future, talking about marriage and children, and building something beautiful together. The mention of children makes my stomach clench because I remember the pregnancy announcement. Remember Emma's gentle face and swollen belly. Remember realizing that while I was planning our wedding, Marcus was already creating a family with someone else. But this time I'm prepared for his psychological warfare. This time I won't let him use my dreams against me. Those are exactly the kinds of big decisions that require careful consideration, I reply, my voice steady, despite the way his eyes are studying my face like he's trying to solve a puzzle. And I've realized I've been rushing into things without taking time to really understand what I want from life. What kind of partnership would actually make me happy? Marcus leans forward in his chair, employing the body language of concerned intimacy that once made me feel cherished and protected, but now makes me want to recoil. And I realize that every gesture, every expression, every word out of his mouth is calculated for maximum emotional impact rather than genuine feeling. Sophia, talk to me, he says, reaching for my hand with the kind of gentle insistence that used to break down all my defenses. Whatever you're going through, we can work through it together. That's what people who love each other do. They face challenges as a team. They don't pull away when things get complicated. The irony of Marcus Chen lecturing me about teamwork and commitment while secretly planning the destruction of my family is so profound that I almost laugh. But instead, I simply withdraw my hand from his reach and stand up, creating physical distance that reinforces the emotional boundary I'm establishing. I think you should go, I say, and the words taste like victory because this time I'm the one ending the conversation. This time I'm the one maintaining control. This time I'm refusing to play the role of desperate girlfriend that Marcus needs me to play for his plan to work. Marcus stands as well, and for a moment his mask slips completely, revealing a flash of anger so intense it makes me glad I discovered his true nature before he had complete access to my life, before he had the opportunity to isolate me from everyone who might protect me from his manipulations. Fine, he says, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. If you need space, I'll give you space. But I hope you'll realize that what we have is special, that finding someone who loves you for who you really are, rather than what your family name represents, is rare and precious and not something you should throw away lightly. The accusation that I'm shallow and materialistic, that I don't appreciate real love when I have it, is exactly the kind of psychological manipulation Marcus used in my past life to make me doubt my own worth, to make me feel grateful for his attention rather than questioning his motives, but this time I recognize it for what it is: projection designed to make me chase after his approval. Goodbye, Marcus, I say simply, and I walk him to the door without explaining myself further, without giving him the opening he needs to turn this conversation into another opportunity to demonstrate his caring nature and my unreasonable behavior. After he leaves, I stand in my foyer feeling lighter than I have in years, feeling like I've just stepped out of a cage I didn't even realize I was trapped in. And I understand that this is what freedom feels like: the freedom to trust my own instincts, to prioritize my own well-being, to refuse to participate in relationships that diminish rather than enhance my life. The first week of my strategic withdrawal from Marcus unfolds exactly as I planned, with him trying every manipulation tactic in his arsenal to regain the access and control he needs for his plan to work. But this time, I'm immune to his methods because I know what he's really after, what he's really capable of, what he's really planning for my family. Marcus calls and texts constantly, each message carefully crafted to seem concerned rather than controlling, worried about my emotional state rather than frustrated by my lack of cooperation. And I delete them all without responding because I know that any engagement with his attempts at contact will be twisted into evidence that I'm confused and need his guidance to think clearly. He shows up at my office unannounced with flowers and my favorite lunch from the restaurant where we had our first date, employing nostalgia as a weapon to break down my defenses. But I have my assistant, Jenny Morrison, tell him I'm in meetings all day, and I watch from my office window as he stands on the sidewalk looking genuinely confused by my refusal to see him. The beauty of having lived through his betrayal once is that I can predict his every move, anticipate his every strategy, Stay 3 steps ahead of his manipulation because I know exactly what he'll try next and exactly how to neutralize it before it can take effect. Jenny, who in my past life was fired at Marcus's suggestion for being too protective of me, proves her loyalty by following my instructions without question, by creating barriers between Marcus and me without needing to understand why those barriers are necessary, by demonstrating the kind of professional competence that Marcus systematically undermined in order to make me more dependent on his advice. Mr. Chen seems very concerned about you, Jenny says after his third attempt to gain access to my office. He's asking whether you're ill or if something's happened to upset you, whether there's anything he can do to help. Tell Mr. Chen that I appreciate his concern, but I'm perfectly fine and simply need some space to focus on business priorities, I reply. And I can see Jenny's relief at having clear instructions, rather than being caught in the middle of relationship drama she doesn't understand. The second week brings escalation, with Marcus employing the services of Emma Liu for the first time. Though I know he's presenting their interaction to her as coincidental rather than strategic, as chance meetings rather than calculated moves in his campaign to reclaim control over me and my family's resources. Emma appears at the coffee shop where I usually go for my morning latte, sitting at a table near the window with a book and a gentle smile, and I realize that Marcus has done his research, has learned my routine well enough to position his secret girlfriend where I'm most likely to encounter her, where their meet-cute can unfold naturally rather than seeming forced or suspicious. I change my routine immediately, switching to a different coffee shop across town, and I can only imagine Marcus's frustration when his carefully orchestrated chance encounter fails to materialize, when his timeline for introducing Emma into my awareness gets disrupted by my refusal to follow predictable patterns. The third week brings desperation, with Marcus finally showing his hand by arriving at my family's mansion unannounced, claiming he's worried about my mental health and asking to speak with my parents about his concerns, employing the classic manipulation tactic of going around me to authority figures who might pressure me to resume our relationship. But this time, I'm prepared for his escalation. This time, I've already spoken with my parents about needing space to evaluate my relationship with Marcus. This time, they're primed to see his behavior as controlling rather than caring, possessive rather than protective. Marcus seems very upset, my mother, Catherine, says after he leaves, having been politely but firmly turned away by our security staff. He's saying you won't return his calls or see him, that he's worried you're having some kind of breakdown and need professional help. Marcus is having trouble accepting that I need space in our relationship, I reply carefully, planting the seeds of doubt about his character without making accusations I can't yet prove, and his reaction to my request for independence is concerning. My father, Richard, who in my past life welcomed Marcus like the son he never had, looks thoughtful rather than dismissive, and I realize that seeing Marcus's desperate behavior firsthand has raised questions about the young man's character that wouldn't have occurred to him if their interactions had remained pleasant and superficial. A man who truly respects you would honor your request for space rather than trying to circumvent it, my father says, and his words carry the weight of 5 decades in business, dealing with people who mistake persistence for strength, aggression for passion, control for love. The fourth week brings my first real victory when Marcus, frustrated by his inability to regain access to me directly, makes his first critical error by pushing too hard too fast, by showing up at a charity luncheon where he knows I'll be present and creating a scene that reveals his true character to people whose opinions matter in our social circle. Sophia, Marcus says, approaching my table where I'm seated with Isabella Rodriguez, my childhood friend who he systematically alienated in my past life by suggesting she was jealous of our relationship and didn't want to see me happy. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. Whatever I did to upset you, whatever misunderstanding has come between us, we can work through it if you'll just give me a chance to explain. The desperation in his voice is audible to everyone at nearby tables. The kind of emotional intensity that seems romantic in movies, but feels disturbing and inappropriate in real life, especially when directed at someone who's clearly trying to maintain distance and boundaries. I've been very clear about needing space, I say calmly, my voice carrying enough authority to make it obvious that I'm not the confused, emotional woman Marcus is trying to portray me as. And I would appreciate it if you would respect that request. Marcus's jaw tightens, and I can see him struggling to maintain his facade of concerned boyfriend, while his frustration at my refusal to play along with his script threatens to break through his carefully constructed persona. "This isn't like you," Marcus says, his voice rising slightly as he realizes that creating a public scene isn't working in his favor, that the other guests are beginning to stare not with sympathy for him, but with discomfort at his behavior. "You're acting like a completely different person, like someone's been poisoning your mind against me." The accusation that I'm being manipulated by outside forces, rather than making my own rational decisions, is exactly the kind of gaslighting Marcus used so effectively in my past life. The way he made me doubt my own perceptions and instincts by suggesting that anyone who questioned our relationship was jealous or manipulative themselves. "I think you should leave," Isabella says firmly, and her intervention on my behalf proves that my renewed friendship with her is already paying dividends, that having loyal allies makes it much harder for manipulators to isolate and control their targets. Marcus looks between Isabella and me with something that might be genuine surprise, as if he can't quite believe that his tried and true methods aren't working, that the women he's accustomed to controlling are refusing to follow their assigned roles in his elaborate performance. "Fine," he says, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "But this conversation isn't over, Sophia. We have too much history together, too much invested in our future to throw it all away because you're having some kind of quarter-life crisis." The dismissive characterization of my desire for independence as a quarter-life crisis reveals exactly how Marcus sees me, not as an equal partner with valid concerns and boundaries, but as a child who needs his guidance to make proper decisions, a woman whose thoughts and feelings are only valid when they align with his goals and timeline. After Marcus leaves, Isabella turns to me with eyes full of concern and something that might be relief, and I realize that she's been worried about my relationship with Marcus for longer than I knew, that she noticed warning signs I was too infatuated to see, that my request to renew our friendship has given her permission to voice concerns she's been carrying for months. "Sophia," Isabella says carefully, "I know it's not my place to interfere in your relationship, but Marcus's behavior today, that wasn't normal. That wasn't how someone who respects you should act when you ask for space." "I know," I say simply, and in the relief of having someone witness Marcus's true character, someone whose judgment I trust completely, feels like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I'm starting to see things more clearly now. The fifth week brings the revelation that changes everything, when I use my knowledge of Marcus's timeline to intercept his first attempt at corporate sabotage, the meeting where he planned to pass proprietary information about our new Dubai hotel project to our biggest competitor in exchange for a substantial consulting fee and a promise of future business opportunities. I follow Marcus to his lunch meeting with James Crawford, the acquisitions director for Meridian International Hotels, and I watch from across the restaurant as Marcus hands over the confidential development plans that took my father's team 6 months to create, as he accepts an envelope that I know contains both payment for the information and contact details for future collaboration. The sight of Marcus betraying my family's trust for money, selling out the people who welcomed him into their home and treated him like family, fills me with a cold rage that's somehow more powerful than the devastation I felt in my past life. Because this time, I have the power to stop him. This time, I can protect the people I love from his calculated cruelty. I take photos of the exchange with my phone, documenting the evidence I'll need to expose Marcus's true nature to my family and to law enforcement if necessary. And I realize that having advanced knowledge of his crimes gives me an almost overwhelming advantage in any confrontation that might follow. But instead of rushing to expose Marcus immediately, I decide to use his own strategy against him, to let him think his plan is working while I systematically dismantle his support system and build my own alliance network to beat him at his own game by playing it better than he ever imagined possible. The sixth week brings my introduction to Alexander Hartwell, and this time, I'm prepared to recognize what I was too distracted to see in my past life. That the quiet, thoughtful man who's been my family's friend and business partner for over a decade has feelings for me that he's never expressed out of respect for my relationship with Marcus. Feelings that are genuine and patient and completely different from Marcus's calculated pursuit. Alexander attends my father's birthday dinner as he has for the past 5 years, but this time I actually see him, really look at him without the distorting lens of my infatuation with Marcus, and I realize that he's handsome in an understated way that doesn't demand attention. intelligent in a way that doesn't need constant validation, successful in a way that doesn't require conquest of others to feel complete. You seem different tonight, Alexander says when we find ourselves alone on the terrace after dinner, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the calculating interest I'm now trained to recognize, more present, if that makes sense. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I really want from life, I reply honestly. About the difference between what looks good on paper and what actually makes me happy. About the importance of being with people who see my success as something to celebrate rather than something to diminish. Alexander nods thoughtfully, and I realize that he understands exactly what I'm talking about. That he's been watching my relationship with Marcus with the kind of careful concern that comes from genuine care rather than possessive interest. Marcus seems to be struggling with your newfound independence, Alexander observes, and his tone is carefully neutral, neither approving nor disapproving, simply acknowledging a fact that others have noticed as well. Marcus is having difficulty accepting that I'm capable of making my own decisions about what I need in a relationship, I say. And I can see Alexander processing this information, understanding the implications of what I'm really saying about the dynamics between Marcus and me. For what it's worth, Alexander says carefully, I think anyone who tries to diminish your strength and independence doesn't deserve to be part of your life, regardless of how that relationship is labeled or what history you share. The simple validation of my right to set boundaries and expect them to be respected feels revolutionary after months of Marcus's psychological manipulation, and I realize that this is what healthy relationship dynamics look like. Mutual respect, support for each other's growth, celebration of individual strength rather than attempts to undermine it. The seventh week brings Marcus's first major miscalculation when he decides to escalate his campaign by introducing Emma Lou into the situation more directly, arranging for her to accidentally encounter me at the gallery opening where he knows I'll be present, believing that seeing his pregnant girlfriend will trigger the jealousy and competition he needs to regain control over me. Emma approaches me during the cocktail hour with a shy smile and an obvious baby bump, and I realize that she's even younger than I remembered, probably no more than 22 or 23, with the kind of genuine sweetness that makes Marcus's manipulation of her seem even more cruel and calculating. "Excuse me," Emma says politely, "aren't you Sophia Blackwood? I've heard so much about your family's hotels, they sound absolutely magical, like something out of a fairy tale." The genuine admiration in her voice, the lack of any hostility or competitiveness, tells me that Marcus has painted me as someone very different to Emma than who I actually am, that he's probably portrayed me as cold and materialistic, focused on business success rather than human connections. Exactly the kind of woman who would make him seem heroic for choosing true love over social expectations. "Thank you," I say warmly. "That's very kind of you to say. What's your name?" "Emma Lou," she says, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach, in the protective gesture of pregnant women everywhere. "I'm a kindergarten teacher, though I'm taking some time off right now because of the baby." I study Emma's face as she speaks, looking for signs of the calculated manipulation I've learned to recognize in Marcus. But all I see is genuine kindness and a slightly worried expression that suggests she's not entirely comfortable with this encounter, that perhaps Marcus pushed her into this meeting against her better judgment. "Congratulations on your pregnancy," I say sincerely. "You must be very excited about becoming a mother." Emma's face lights up with the kind of radiant joy that can't be faked, the deep happiness of a woman who truly wants the child she's carrying. And I realize that whatever else is true about Marcus's manipulation of both of us, Emma's love for her baby is completely genuine and deserves to be protected from the fallout of his schemes. "I am," Emma says, "though I have to admit I'm a little nervous too. There's so much to learn, so much responsibility. I want to make sure I do everything right for my baby." The vulnerability in her voice, the genuine desire to be a good mother, makes me feel protective of Emma in a way I never expected. And I realize that she's as much a victim of Marcus's manipulation as I am, just being used in a different way for a different purpose. "You seem like you'll be a wonderful mother," I say honestly. "Your baby is lucky to have someone who cares so much about doing right by them." Emma blushes at the compliment, and I can see that Marcus has probably spent months undermining her confidence, making her feel insecure about her ability to provide for their child, creating dependence that he can exploit to maintain control over her, just as he tried to do with me. The eighth week brings the confrontation I've been preparing for, when Marcus finally realizes that his usual tactics aren't working and decides to play his ace card, threatening to expose evidence of my family's business practices that he claims to have discovered during his time as my father's advisor. Evidence that I know he fabricated using his insider access to our systems. Marcus requests a private meeting at his office, and I agree to see him because I'm ready for this confrontation, prepared with my own evidence of his corporate espionage and financial fraud, ready to turn his blackmail attempt into his final defeat. Sophia, Marcus says when I arrive at his office, his demeanor completely different from the desperate, pleading man who's been chasing after me for 2 months, now cold and calculating in a way that confirms everything I know about his true character. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about our situation. I agree, I say calmly, taking a seat across from his desk and maintaining eye contact, despite the way he's trying to intimidate me with his new authoritative posture. I think honesty is exactly what this situation requires. Marcus opens a file folder on his desk and slides several documents across to me, financial records and internal communications that I recognize from my father's business operations, though I can see they've been altered to suggest improprieties that don't actually exist. During my time working with your father, I discovered some concerning discrepancies in Blackwood Hotel's accounting practices, Marcus says, his voice taking on the tone of a prosecutor presenting evidence. Irregularities that could be very damaging if they came to light during a regulatory investigation. The fabricated evidence is sophisticated enough to cause serious problems for my family if presented to the wrong people, and I realize that Marcus has been planning this blackmail attempt for months, creating false documentation that could destroy our reputation even if we eventually proved our innocence. These documents have been altered, I say calmly, pulling out my phone and opening the photo gallery where I've stored evidence of Marcus's actual crimes. And I have proof that you've been selling our proprietary information to competitors, which is both a breach of contract and a federal crime. Marcus's confident expression falters as I show him the photos of his meeting with James Crawford, the images of him handing over confidential development plans and accepting payment for corporate espionage, evidence that could send him to prison for industrial espionage and put him in serious legal jeopardy. You've been following me, Marcus says, and his voice carries a note of genuine surprise, as if he never considered that I might be capable of strategic thinking and evidence gathering, as if he assumed I would remain passive and reactive while he orchestrated my destruction. I've been protecting my family from someone who's been systematically betraying our trust, I reply. Someone who spent 3 years pretending to love me while planning our destruction. Someone who's now trying to blackmail me with fabricated evidence to cover up his own crimes. Marcus stares at the photos for a long moment, and I can see him calculating his options, weighing the strength of my evidence against his, realizing that his carefully constructed plan has been exposed and neutralized by someone he thought he had completely under control. What do you want? Marcus asks finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. And I realize that this is the first time he's seen me as an actual adversary rather than a victim to be manipulated. The first time he's been forced to treat me as an equal rather than a pawn in his game. I want you to stay away from me and my family, I say firmly. I want you to withdraw from any business dealings involving Blackwood Hotels, and I want you to understand that if you ever try to hurt us again, I will make sure these photos find their way to law enforcement and to every major hotel chain in the country. Marcus's jaw clenches, and for a moment I see the full extent of his rage. The fury of a man whose elaborate revenge plot has been dismantled by the very woman he thought he had broken. But he's smart enough to recognize when he's been beaten. Smart enough to know that pushing further will only make his situation worse. Fine, Marcus says through gritted teeth. But this isn't over between us, Sophia. People like you always think you're untouchable. Always think your money and family name can protect you from consequences. But sooner or later, everyone faces judgment for their actions. Yes, I agree calmly, standing to leave. They do. And I think you're about to discover exactly what that feels like. The 9th week brings the most satisfying victory of all when Marcus's desperate attempt to salvage his plan by making a public scene at the charity gala, the same event where he humiliated me in my past life, backfires spectacularly as he reveals his true character to everyone who matters in our social circle. Marcus arrives at the Grand Meridian Hotel with Emma on his arm, clearly hoping to recreate the dramatic announcement that destroyed me before. But this time, I'm prepared for his performance. This time, I have allies and evidence. This time, I'm the one controlling the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus says, taking the microphone during the silent auction portion of the evening, I want to share something that's been weighing on my heart, something about the importance of choosing authenticity over social expectations. But instead of the rapt attention he received in my past life, I can see that people are uncomfortable with his appropriation of the charity event for personal drama, that his decision to turn a fundraiser for children's hospitals into a stage for his relationship issues is being perceived as narcissistic and inappropriate. Emma Lou and I have found something real together, Marcus continues, but his voice sounds desperate rather than confident, and I can see Emma beside him looking increasingly uncomfortable with being used as a prop in his public performance, something that transcends the shallow materialism and social climbing that passes for love in circles like this. The direct insult to everyone in attendance, the implication that their values and relationships are somehow inferior to his, creates a ripple of offended murmurs throughout the ballroom, and I realize that Marcus has completely misread the room, completely miscalculated the impact of his words. Alexander, who's standing beside me near the back of the ballroom, leans over to whisper, "Is he actually trying to insult everyone here while asking for their approval? This is spectacular self-destruction." "Emma is pregnant with my child," Marcus announces, apparently believing that the pregnancy revelation will generate sympathy and support. "And I want everyone to know that I choose love over money, authenticity over arrangement, real connection over social convenience." But instead of applause, Marcus is met with uncomfortable silence and the kind of awkward shifting that happens when someone has badly misjudged their audience, when they've revealed more about their character than they intended, when they've made themselves the villain in their own story. Emma tugs on Marcus's sleeve, clearly wanting him to stop talking, and I can see the exact moment when she realizes that this public spectacle isn't the romantic gesture Marcus probably described to her, but a cruel and calculated attack on people who've done nothing to deserve his contempt. "I think that's enough," the evening's host says, gently taking the microphone from Marcus with the kind of firm politeness that makes it clear his speech is over, whether he wants it to be or not. "Let's return to supporting the wonderful work of Children's Hospital Foundation." Marcus stands frozen for a moment, apparently unable to process that his grand gesture has been received as an embarrassing outburst rather than a romantic triumph, that he's managed to make himself look desperate and unhinged rather than principled and passionate. The 10th week brings the final phase of my victory when Marcus's business and personal life begin to collapse under the weight of his own poor decisions, when the consequences of his manipulative behavior finally catch up with him in ways that have nothing to do with my intervention. Emma breaks up with Marcus publicly at a coffee shop downtown, their argument overheard by at least a dozen witnesses who later share the story throughout our social circle, describing how she finally confronted him about his obsession with me and his use of her pregnancy as a weapon against my family. "You never loved me," Emma says, according to Isabella, who witnessed the entire confrontation. "You loved the idea of hurting Sophia, of proving that you could take something away from her. And I won't let you use our baby as part of your revenge fantasy against people who never did anything to deserve your hatred." The breakup makes it clear to everyone that Marcus's romantic narrative was false, that he was using Emma just as much as he was using me, that his entire persona as a man who chose love over money was a carefully constructed lie designed to mask his real motivations. Marcus's law practice begins to suffer as word spreads about his unprofessional behavior, his inappropriate use of client information, and his reputation for manipulation and dishonesty, and I watch from a distance as the career he built on charm and deception crumbles under scrutiny. The 11th week brings my engagement to Alexander Hartwell, a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than manipulation and social climbing, and I realize that this is what love actually feels like when it's not contaminated by hidden agendas and calculated cruelty. Alexander proposes during a quiet dinner at our family's private dining room, with no audience except my parents and no ulterior motives, except his genuine desire to build a life together based on honesty and mutual support. "I know this might seem sudden to everyone else," Alexander says, holding my hand across the table, with the kind of gentle strength that comes from confidence rather than insecurity. But I've loved you for years. I've just been waiting for you to be free to see what was right in front of you. The proposal is everything Marcus's elaborate romantic gestures never were. Genuine, thoughtful, focused on my happiness rather than his own agenda. And I realize that the difference between authentic love and skilled manipulation is that real love makes you feel more like yourself rather than less. Yes, I say simply, and the word carries all the relief and joy of someone who's finally found her way home after being lost in the wilderness. Someone who's learned to recognize the difference between being wanted and being valued, between being pursued and being cherished. The 12th and final week brings my wedding to Alexander, held in the same Blackwood family chapel that Marcus tried to claim in my past life, but this time filled with people who genuinely love and support us rather than guests who came to witness a social spectacle. My father walks me down the aisle with tears in his eyes, healthy and strong and proud of the woman I've become, and I realize that this second chance at life gave me more than just the opportunity to avoid Marcus's betrayal. It gave me the chance to become the person I was always meant to be. Alexander's vows promise partnership rather than possession, support rather than control. And as we exchange rings, I think about how Marcus tried to convince me that love meant surrendering my independence when real love actually means finding someone who celebrates your strength rather than trying to diminish it. Emma attends the wedding with her new boyfriend, a fellow teacher who treats her with the kindness and respect she deserves. And she looks radiant in a way she never did with Marcus, glowing with the confidence that comes from being genuinely valued rather than used. Marcus doesn't attend, of course, and according to the latest gossip, he's left town entirely. His law practice dissolved, his reputation destroyed, his grand revenge plot against my family having backfired so completely that he's the one who ended up losing everything. 5 years later, I stand in the nursery of our new home, watching Alexander read bedtime stories to our 2-year-old daughter while I cradle our infant son, and I realize that this is what happiness looks like. Not the desperate, clinging need that Marcus convinced me was love, but the quiet contentment of being with someone who sees your success as their victory, your happiness as their goal, your dreams as worth supporting rather than sabotaging. Our daughter has Alexander's thoughtful eyes and my stubborn determination, and I know she'll grow up understanding that real love doesn't require her to make herself smaller. To make someone else feel bigger, that genuine partnership means building each other up rather than tearing each other down. Blackwood Hartwell Hotels has expanded internationally under our joint leadership, becoming an even more successful enterprise than my family could have imagined. And I realized that Marcus's assumption that I was weak and dependent was his fatal error. He never understood that taking away his manipulation and control wouldn't diminish me but would finally allow me to flourish. I learned that sometimes the only way to win is not to play the game they've designed to trap you. That refusing to compete for someone's attention can be the most powerful move of all. That disappearing from someone's story doesn't mean you've lost. Sometimes it means you've finally found the strength to write your own ending. Standing in my beautiful home with my loving family, watching my children grow up surrounded by people who value them for who they are, rather than what they can provide, I realized that Marcus Chen was right about one thing. I did change completely after that morning when I told him I needed space. I became the woman I was always meant to be. Strong enough to recognize manipulation, confident enough to trust my own instincts, wise enough to choose love that builds me up rather than tears me down, and brave enough to disappear from a story that was designed to destroy me so I could write my own happy ending instead.